Hey everybody, this is Mike with the One Stop Co-op Shop, and today I'm doing a competitive review of Unfathomable, the remake and reimagining of Battlestar Galactica, a hidden traitor game. And disclaimer that I got a review copy of the base game for this, but I bought the expansion myself. In Unfathomable, the players are on a boat in an Arkham Horror-style universe, and deep ones are attacking that boat and trying to destroy it, led by Dagon and Mother Hydra. And the players are trying to fight them off and keep the ship moving forward so they can eventually reach land and survive. But like I said, this is a hidden traitor game, so while most of the players are human, some of them are hybrids or cultists who secretly want the entire team to fail. Which mainly comes out in this Mythos card mechanic where every turn the players are trying to avert crises by playing action cards from their hands. So let's discuss 5 key things to know about Unfathomable. So first, from my number 5 point, the least important to know, but still important or I wouldn't mention it, I'm looking at the characters and items, and this is generally a pro for my taste. In just the base game, there are a bunch of different characters. Each of them gets a different mix of action cards each round, which will give them access to different powers and abilities. They also have ongoing abilities, and these tend to be impactful and interesting, making the game feel a little different based on who's in play. But at the same time, they don't feel like they force your character to go down a single path and do the exact same action all the time. You can still branch out. They also each have a once per game feat. They have a starting item, and you can get more to give you more bonuses and combos. But they each also have a reveal mechanic if they're a traitor. They have a unique Mythos card. So nice variety overall to keep the game fresh, even if you don't get the expansion. Although if you do, there's a lot more characters in there. Next at number 4, I'm looking at the monster attacks. And this is also a pro for my taste. So as the game goes along, you'll be spawning deep ones at first into the water. Then they'll climb up onto the ship. Then they'll go inside and start breaking things. Mother Hydra will also break things. Dagon will throw even more dudes onto the ship. And there's a lot of tension in this because there's tons of things you could be doing with your actions, but especially if you're a combat character, you can go over there and roll some dice and try to blast them. Now, there is die luck here. You have to roll to hit. There are tons of ways to mitigate this. Some items make the attacking automatic or give you a bonus, but yeah, sometimes you'll miss and your action might be wasted. But then there's also an ebb and flow because as this travel track advances, the monsters will be pushed backwards in the ocean. And whenever the ritual track advances all the way, all the monsters that aren't inside of the ship will get blasted away until they build back up again. So if you can get past the luck element, which again isn't too bad, the tension and the ebb and flow and variety of how the monsters attack is a great element here. Next, number 3, which is also a pro with some caveats for me, are the Mythos cards that you're drawing every turn. So each player on their turn will take 2 actions. That's usually pretty quick. And then they draw a Mythos card that has some kind of flavor text, and it's either going to have a skill test they have to pass, or an either-or ethical choice one of the characters has to make. And these add a lot of theme and flavor to the game. They add a ton of tension, especially with the skill checks, because each of the players has a limited number of action cards in their hand. And as I mentioned, you can use them on your turn to do cool stuff, but you can also play them to help out with the skill checks. But as you do so, you're going to slowly run out of cards because you only get to draw back up on your turn. And especially if you're playing the game with 5 or 6 people, it's going to take a while. So you need to shepherd your resources, figure out which skill checks you want to pass, which ones you don't. But there's also a chaos deck of cards that contains cards that could be negative for skill checks or positive, and 2 of those are added each time, so you don't know if they're going to help or hurt. And of course, you've got some traitors who might be throwing in negative cards while pretending they're positive, so you're constantly trying to figure out what people are doing and why they're doing it, which makes this one of the strongest sources of tension in the entire game. Now, some caveats, there is a lot of luck in which cards come out when, like if you get a lot of cards that require the exact same types of cards to pass the skill checks, you're just going to fail them. And also these Mythos cards determine what kind of monsters attack, and also which tracks advance, the travel one or the ritual one. And the luck of the draw there can be pretty impactful as well. And maybe my biggest concern with the Mythos cards is that if the players aren't invested in them, like if I have no cards left in my hand and I can't help out anyway, then having to resolve a Mythos card after each player's turn can bog things down, because really often the resolution of the Mythos card takes longer than the entire player's turn. So you're spending more time dealing with these than you are actually doing stuff on the ship, for better or worse. And that transitions nicely into my number 2, a full-on con. It was almost my number 1 for the game, and that is how long it takes to play. We used to play a ton of Battlestar Galactica. That's why I was interested in playing this game. That was our favorite hidden traitor game back in the day. But we didn't play it very often because it would take 3 or 4 or 5 hours to get through a game. And when Unfathomable was first announced, I remember hearing that maybe it was going to be shorter, but I have not found that to be the case at all. I think it's pretty much just as long. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that if you and your group are ready for an epic experience. But where it does become a full-on con, at least for me, is, like I said, sometimes you won't have that many action cards and you're just waiting for the turn to come around to you. Sometimes you'll spend multiple turns doing the same thing, like fighting monsters or activating the boiler room to speed up the ship. So it's both incredibly long, but sometimes quite monotonous, and that can be very frustrating. Now, to be fair, when the game is at its best, when the hidden traitor aspect is really singing and you have a group that's really playing that game and having a lot of table talk, and if everybody enjoys that, this concern can fall away completely and the game can be an amazing experience. But if you don't have people who aren't invested that way, or if you have bad traitors who reveal themselves too quickly, then it just becomes a slog to get through a lot of the time. And that goes right into my number one point about the game, the most important thing to know, which is the hidden traitor aspect. And this is a mix for my taste. It is kind of the key defining trait of the game. They could make a cooperative version of this, but, they didn't want to because they were trying to redo Battlestar Galactica. But the tension of this can be great because it gives every single action extra importance. Did they go and do that bad action because they weren't strategizing well, or is it because they're actually a hybrid trying to betray us? If they were the keeper of the tome and they drew 2 spells and cast one that wasn't very helpful, was the other spell amazing and they just lied, or did they draw 2 bad spells? Did we fail that super important skill check because we had bad luck with the Chaos deck, or was one of those negative cards from one of our allies? These kind of questions, again, can make the game amazing if everybody is invested, but there's also a very fragile system because, like I mentioned, if someone is not very good at being the hybrid or makes a blunder where they kind of out themselves and show who they are early, they can end up in the brig, not being able to influence the game very much and feeling like they have a lot of wasted turns, and then you have less tension once you know who the traitors are because you can just kind of focus on saving the ship and keeping them locked down. So this is a great mechanic. It's really the heart of the game, and if you can get into it, it can be awesome, but it can also make things flop for the wrong group. So overall, you might want to try Unfathomable if you like hidden traitor games, if you like survival games, if you like really tense, epic games with a lot of emergent narrative. But on the other hand, if you don't have a group that loves hidden traitor games, if you don't have a group that's going to be invested in the game for 3 or 4 or 5 hours, this really has to be a pass. It's a very niche group of people that are going to enjoy this one this day and age, I think. And at least for me and my group, when we play hidden traitor games, we tend to gravitate toward the faster ones, some older ones like Resistance or One Night Werewolf. I'm sure there's a lot of newer ones I haven't played recently because this is not a genre of game I'm as high on as I used to be 5 or 6 years ago. And hey, we've got 2 bonus reviews. From the Abyss, the expansion for this one, I think is quite good, although again, you have to already enjoy the core game. It adds in these boon cards that are a wild positive for skill checks, kind of the counter to the treachery cards from the base game that are a wild negative. And 2 of each of these get shuffled into the Chaos deck, which gives traitor players a bit more of an opportunity to use their own treachery cards if they get them, and there are more mechanics in this one for players who draw treachery cards, so even more yumminess possible with obfuscation and trying to hide your traitor's activities. There are also, as I mentioned, a ton of new characters, a bunch of new items, tons of new Mythos cards, so there's lots of stuff to play with there. They also added a new type of card to make it more common for characters to have their unique Mythos card fire off, which is always fun. And maybe my favorite thing, they added allies that'll pop up on the board as you rescue passengers, and they give you extra ways to use your cards, especially your cruddy ones you might not do much with otherwise, to perform extra actions on your turn, making the board play even more interesting. The only part of the expansion that I'm not too much of a fan of are these 3 new special monsters that can come out. They are unique and varied, but it just adds a little bit more rules than I really like, whereas pretty much everything else in the expansion except the allies is pretty straightforward and just integrates seamlessly. And hey, for a final bonus, let's compare this game to Battlestar Galactica really quickly, because I don't have a copy of Battlestar anymore. I culled that years ago. But overall, I would say I think the design of Unfathomable is an improvement over Battlestar. I think it's interesting that they separated the ritual and the travel tracks. In Battlestar Galactica, it was 1 track, and when you teleported away, all the enemies would go away too, which of course makes total thematic sense. But this adds some extra consideration, having them separate. I think the character design is better. There were some characters in Battlestar Galactica that weren't able to use their powers consistently. Same thing for the locations. I think all of them are at least sometimes useful, which was not always the case in Battlestar. Also, a big improvement in Battlestar, you had this collaborator role, which was pretty famously broken, whereas the new version of that, the cultist, is on the traitor side, but they have to let the humans get almost to victory. They have to get almost to winning the game before they can tank things, so it tends to balance out better at the player count that use this role. There are a lot of other little differences, but yeah, overall, I would say the design is cleaner and better. Now, the big question is the theme better? And that's a really tough one because they didn't use any, at least that I recognize, recognizable characters from the Arkham files. You don't have Daisy. You don't have Joe Diamond. You don't have any of those people here. Instead, you've got these randos that nobody's ever heard of before, and I totally get why they did this, because the theme of the game is that any one of these people could be like a deep one in disguise, could be a hybrid, right? And you don't want to do that to your favorite characters, like have Jenny Barnes suddenly become a fish person. That'd be a little bit weird thematically. But at the same time, as a big fan of the Arkham Files and all those Arkham horror games from Fantasy Flight, it would have been cool to see some characters I recognize. And that's probably the big advantage of Battlestar Galactica, if you're somebody like me who watched it, because that show's pretty old now, and I think this theme will probably resonate more for people if they haven't seen the show than a bunch of photo stills from a show that they've never watched. So for me, it was awesome to play Baltar or play Adama, and the Mythos cards would have pictures from actual episodes of the show that I would recognize, so that just allowed me to nerd out in lots of fun ways. But again, I think these days, most people haven't watched that. I'm not even sure where you go to watch it. I'm not sure if it's streaming anywhere. And without those connections, I think this is the better design, and again, maybe a theme you can jump into more easily, because lots of people have played Arkham Horror and Lovecraft and Call of Cthulhu themed games, whereas Battlestar Galactica is kind of its own niche sci-fi thing, and if you're not familiar with it, then I think it might fall flat. So yeah, as huge of a fan of Battlestar Galactica as I was back in the day, I think Unfathomable is the right way to go. Unless you're a huge fan of the show, I would not try to track down an old copy of the original game. I think this one is mostly designed better in almost every way. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. Hope that was helpful, and I'll see you at the next stop.